Hello, welcome to this video on Thomas Egenes Sanskrit, Lesson 11, Grammar and Vocabulary, and I'm covering in this video the material on pages 142 to 150. Fear not, don't try and learn it all by heart at this stage, just be aware that it exists and remember where to find it if you need to look it up. So we're looking here at some internal Sandhi rules. On page 142, there's a description of the rule that usually if you have an S, a S, and it is preceded in the same word by a vowel other than A or A, it becomes a sh. So it becomes a sh if it is preceded by a vowel I, U, U, and so on, E, I, O, Au, R, R. It also becomes a sh if it immediately follows a k or a r within the same word. And a chart is given here. Again, don't try to learn it by heart. Just watch what happens. It's either a s or a sh, and if something expected to be a s becomes a sh, it's because of this rule. Also bear in mind that where the s becomes a sh because of a preceding vowel, then a following t also becomes retroflexed. I'll give you an example. It will make everything very easy to follow. Give you the iPad. Here we are. The root sta means to stand, cognate with our English word to stand. It's a verb that reduplicates in the present tense. So it reduplicates, that is to say, it reduplicates part of the first syllable and in a modified form. In this case, part of the only syllable. The only one syllable sta. So you don't say stati, you reduplicate it, but instead of reduplicating, we're saying stati, because tishtati. So the syllable is reduced to a t for the purposes of reduplication. So he, she, or it stands. You would expect to see, without this rule we've just discovered, tistati. However, now, because in the same word it's preceded by a vowel other than a, the s is retroflexed, tishtati. Now, because that sh becomes a retroflex, the following t also becomes a retroflex, and that accounts for the form tishtati. In those times, in ancient times, it was probably regarded as just a phonetic variant of a s, tishtati, tistati, tishtati. That also accounts, by the way, for the Pali form, the equivalent word in Pali is titati. So in other words, the sh becomes a double retroflex t, following the normal patterns of phonetic change from Sanskrit to Pali. Now, the other rule we all know already is that a n changes to a n, a retroflex n, if preceded in the same word by a r or vocalic r or r, or by the retroflex sh. So, a word for a debt is rina. We have rama, but the instrumental ramena. So we've got the r there, causes that n, the usual ena ending for the instrumental makes it ena because of the preceding r, and the intervening m does not block it. Now you've got these rather forbidding looking kind of lists of consonants that do not, that block the effect of the r on the n. For example, rasa, taste, rasa. Instrumental rasena, an oath, like an oath to follow some spiritual practice or an oath of renunciation is vrata, and the instrumental vratena. Note that in both of these cases, rasa rasena, vrata vratena, the n in the instrumental ending is not retroflex because the intervening consonant belongs in this block, this list of consonants that, as it were, block the effect of the r on the following n. Again, all you need to do at this stage is look for the pattern, the one underlying reason why. You will see that all of the intervening consonants that block the effect of the r on the n are consonants that of themselves require a change of the position of the tongue. M doesn't. The consonants, or the position of the tip of the tongue, I should say. To pronounce the consonants in the k varga, that's the consonants in the row beginning with k, the k, k, g, g, ng, h, do not require a change in the position of the tip of the tongue. Therefore, the intervention of those consonants does not block the effect of the r on the n. Look at the word varga, instrumental vargena. That's because the g does not require, to pronounce a g, you don't need to change where the tip of the tongue is, maybe slightly because you're moving the tongue at the back, but not a major change in the position of the tip of the tongue. Whereas, and the same applies to the final varga, the pa, pa, ba, ba, ma, and va. If any of those intervene, then that will not block the effect. Let me give you an example here. For example, the name Kaurava will make its instrumental in Kauravena because the v has not required a change in the tip of the tongue. Look at all the other ones that do block the effect of the r on the n. They're all look cha, ta, ta, and all those are cha, cha, ja, ja, nya. Ya, by the way, does not block the effect. The ta, ta, and so on, ta, ta, these are all consonants where the position of the tip of the tongue has to change. So if that happens, then the effect of the r on the n is blocked because the configuration of the tongue has changed. This might seem a little bit daunting to start with, but we'll see more of it as we go along. So I say don't trouble to learn it by heart at this stage. Just be aware of it and know where to find it if you need to look it up. Looking at page 144, you might find this a slightly puzzling page. And it is, to a certain extent, a theoretical kind of page because Egenes says that there are standard endings to nouns. And I'm reading from the top of page 144. And it will help to compare all future declensions with the standard endings. Some declensions follow these endings more closely than other declensions. Yes, that's certainly true. The standard endings are the same for all genders except the neuter nominative and neuter accusative. Remember, neuter nominative is always the same as accusative, which are the and the e in the e. That's singular, dual, plural. Typical endings are e, and e for the neuter. So if you look at this table of endings here, that actually holds good pretty accurately for words of the consonant declension. That's words in which the stem form ends in a consonant and not a vowel. And you may ask yourselves, well, why then, for example, if you look at the nominative ending in s, where does that come in with our consonantal declensions? For example, the word yogin, stem form yogin, masculine singular yogi. Where's the S there? Well, the answer is it used to be theoretically there, and at a very early stage of the language, it probably was there. Don't bother about that too much now. Just say this is a broad guide to what theoretically the endings are, but the endings vary depending on the stem of the noun. For example, on the very next page, we've got the word for army. Sena, which is feminine, ending in a long a. And where's the s there? The s that we're told is a characteristic of masculine and feminine singulars. Well, the answer is actually it's not there. Maybe it used to be a long time ago, but it is there in many other forms of the noun. For instance, nouns ending in a short e. Look at the word buddhi, enlightenment. So the feminine, the nominative does end in an s. So if the nominative standing on its own is of course buddhi, because the final s, remember, if the word is standing on its own, will change to visarga, but that visarga is the result of applying sandhi to what was originally a final s. If you look at apart from the nominatives, the nominative masculine, feminine, neuter, the first items in this table, you'll find that the rest of these endings do in fact apply to the consonantal, so to nouns where the stem ends in a consonant. If we look, for example, at our yogi, look at the yoginam, instrumental yogina, dative yogine, ablative and genitive yogina. It's written here as an as in the table that Egenes gives, but that's the as then becomes ah by sandhi. We're looking at the same sound, or rather, what was essentially the same letter, changing from one to the other by sandhi, and the locative yogini. You will also see, go into soft focus a bit, in the endings that we've learned, the endings of the kind of the akaranta shabda, the words ending in a short ah. You see a little bit of a shadow of these. For example, nara, a man, nara, and if you put nara and then say the dative ending nara e, which is impossible, you can't have an a in Sanskrit. The actual ending is naraya. So you kind of see a hint of it there. The naraya. It doesn't follow it exactly, but there's a hint of it there. With in other cases, it just breaks down. So nara, say this asterisk means these forms don't exist. Nara doesn't exist, but you get narena. There, this oversimplified system does break down slightly. So just be aware of that as a kind of theoretical background. It certainly will help you when you're studying the declensions or the consonantal declensions. Now let's look at something more realistic and down to earth. It's a real live noun ending in a long a. Many feminines end in a long a. I think it's probably might be the most common form of feminine ending, the long a. Let's look down them to sena, accusative senam, instrumental senaya. Note, if you applied the theoretical ending a, you would have sena a. You can kind of see how sena a softens to senaya. dative sena yai. Again, look at theoretically sena e. You can kind of see how it comes sena yai. Ablative and genitive sena ya. Apply the theoretical ending. Sena ya. Okay, a little bit of a soft focus, and you can see how one becomes the other. And senai, sorry, looking at the locative here, senayam is a complete departure from that norm. You find that most feminines end in an ayam or yam or am in the locative. And the vocative of sena is sene. And it's that same vocative that you find, for example, in the Heart Sutra, the Prajna Paramita, the wisdom param to the far shore, ita gone, or the wisdom gone beyond, it's sometimes translated. Prajna param ita. Don't fall into the trap of saying paramita. It's as if paramita. No, it's param, the far shore, ita gone to the far shore, gone beyond. Anyway, at the end of that sutra, the sutra, we have the mantra Gate, Gate, Paragate, Parasangate. These is the vocative form because you are addressing O wisdom, O gone, O gone, O gone beyond, O completely gone beyond, Parasangate. This is the locative of the Prajna Paramita. Looking at the column for the dual, you'll see that the feminine dual for the words in a long a ends in e, so sene, sene, and as always the nominative and the accusative are the same in the dual. We have now the standard endings bhyam for the instrumental dative and ablative. They're just tacked directly onto the end of sena, so sena bhyam for the instrumental dative and ablative. Genitive and locative, remember, instrumental dative and ablative are always the same as one another in the dual. Genitive and locative are always the same as one another in the dual. So senayo. And Arjuna asks Krishna to place his at the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, to place his chariot in between the two armies. It's Senayor Ubhayor Madhye, so Madhya, the middle. Senayor Madhye, in the middle of the two armies. The O becomes Or, of course, by Sandhi. Senayor Madhye, Senayor Madhye. And Ubhaya, both, in the dual locative, sorry, it's the dual genitive here, in the middle of Senayor Ubhayor Madhye, in the middle of both armies. Looking at the plural, Sena, nominative and accusative. The nominative and accusative are the same in this declension. Senah with the visarga. Instrumental dative and ablative. The difference is the instrumental is with a bhi, and the ablative and dative and ablative have a bhya. If you look back on the previous page in the column for the standard, what we call the standard endings, is given bhis, bhyas, and bhyas respectively for instrumental dative and ablative. You'll find this pattern is commonly followed in the consonantal declension, and in most declensions actually. The departure from it is the instrumental plural, say for instance nara, a man. Instrumental plural is narai. And the dative and ablative is narebhya. So with this bhya ending, typical of the dative and ablative plural. Incidentally, in Vedic, not in classical Sanskrit, but in Vedic, an alternative instrumental plural was allowed, narebhi. You will not find that in classical Sanskrit, but you will find it in the Vedas. And that accounts for the Pali students among you, that accounts for the instrumental plural, narehi in Pali. That's with a lenition, a softening of the narebhi to narehi. That accounts for the Pali form, which is traced back to, oops, what have I done here? Which is traceable back to Vedic, and that's not from classical Sanskrit. And we've got our looking at the locative plural, our typical ending su. All locative plurals end in a su or a shu, depending. There's another example. You see, among the men, you've got the su, but automatically becomes nare shu because it's got the preceding vowel other than an a or an a, so nare shu. Note, as always, that the vocative differs from the nominative only in the singular, ever. Always in the plural and the dual, the locative is always the same as the, the vocative is always the same as the nominative. So remember, in the dual, nominative, accusative, and vocative will invariably be the same in all genders. So, looking now at the bottom of, I emphasize, don't learn all this by heart yet. Just be aware that it's there, and learn by assimilation as you read, as you go along. So at the bottom of page 145, Egenes says feminine nouns must have feminine adjectives. Yes. Many of you will be familiar with that, with how that operates in your own languages. So masculine and neuter adjectives normally are declined like nara and pala. Remember, pala, meaning fruit, is a neuter noun. If the noun is feminine, the adjective is declined like the a or the e stems. Some feminine nouns end in a, some end in e. It's not always predictable which it's going to be, and I confess it is I think, for example, I'm just going to call up. Oops, where's Moni? I want to call up Moni Williams here. I think the. Oh, come on. Here we are. Here we are. I'm calling up Moni Williams. Okay, and I'm going to look up Sundara, meaning beautiful. Here we are, Sundara. Okay, so you can look it up in the dictionary. So here the feminine is in E. Now the reason that he needs to put it in here, that's masculine, but when he puts MFM, that's just a sign that it means an adjective. It's a word that has masculine, feminine, and neuter forms, and only adjectives do that. And he states that it's an E, so that you'll know that it's not an R. So you just, if you want to know which it is, look it up here. And some adjectives will allow you to have both forms. Right, let's get back to iPad. Oops, where's it gone? Here we are, yeah. Feminine adjectives ending in a long R will all decline in exactly the same way as sena. You will find that past participle adjectives ending in ta, as in kupita, will, I think I'm right in saying invariably, so it's either always or almost always, but I think it's always, will make their feminines in a, not e. So kupita, kupita, bhita, afraid, bhita. A Buddha, a female Buddha, is a buddha. The words ending in ika tend to make their feminines in E. I don't think they all do. So dharmika, dharmiki, and as we've just seen, Sundara, Sundari. I'm afraid it's one of those things. There are a few standard rules, like the one I've just said about past participles, but it's one of those things that you have to learn as you go along. And even if you can't actively remember, if you see an adjective ending in either a long R or a long E, okay, then you know that that's the feminine form of that adjective. And the ending "r" is actually more common than the "e." It's still lots and lots of them, but the "r" is just more common. Now let's look at the third person pronouns. We have. I'm looking now under paragraph 4 on page 146. Stem tad, masculine, he. So tad actually is the combining form or the stem form. So, for example, artha we had before madartham, for the sake of me, for my sake. You can have tadartham, for his sake. So it's the combining form as well as the stem. Also note, very common, that the form tat, which we'll see on page 147 under the neuter nominative, the tat, is the neuter form, and tat is exactly the same as our English word that. It's the German word das and our English word that. It's that same word come with not much change from Vedic down to us. Om tat sat. Om, that is the truth. And tat tuamasi, that thou art. Tat tuam asi, that thou art. So looking down the singular here, looking at page 148, so we've got saha, then tam, tena, dative tasmai, that lovely chant, tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So Namah, homage, tasmai Shri Gurave, to that blessed Guru. Ablative tasmat, genitive tasya, and locative tasmin. Quite a number of other words follow this declension, and it's called the pronominal declension because this form of declension is peculiar to pronouns. Words like eka, one, for example, that's why you often see at one time is ekasmin samaye, tasmin samaye, at that time, ekasmin samaye. The word, for example, para, another. Anya, another word for another. Sarva is another one that declines according to this pronominal declension. You'll pick them up as you go along. The ablative, you see the form tasmat, from that is very often used in the meaning of therefore. Tasmad vadami, therefore I say. Tasmad, literally from that I say, therefore. So from that is a bit the same in, if you break it down, as therefore, proceeding from that, for that reason. Sometimes tena sometimes is used on its own, meaning by that, meaning for that reason. You can say tena karanena, or just tena. Tena vadami. By that I say, meaning for that reason I say. Look now at the dual. You get tau, tau, tabhyam, 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 the same in tayo and tayo. Look at the plural, te, and tan for the accusative, tai, tebhya, tebhya, tesham. It would have been tesam, but preceded by an e, so the sub becomes the short tesham, of them, and teshu among those. This sarva, I said, some of you might know the chant in Pali that begins Sabbe Buddha. As the same rule operates in Pali. It's not Sarva Buddha, it's wrong, that would be wrong. It is Sarve Buddha, using the pronominal declension. So all Buddhas in the nominative. In Sanskrit, all Buddhas in the accusative would be Sarvan Buddhan. In Pali it would be Sabbe Buddhe. But you'll know in the nominative, Sabbe Buddha, that explains why it's a, not a, because it follows the pronominal declension, where the nominative singular, sorry, the nominative plural ends in a for the masculine. We look at the feminine form now. Sorry, the neuter form. The neuter is identical to the masculine with the exception of the nominative and accusative, so you don't need to learn the separately, only the nominative and the nominative. Well, the accusative is always the same as the nominative and the neuter, so just remember it is tat and te for the dual, and tani with our well-known ani ending for the neuter plural, tani. Beware of the pitfall, because if you see a te, what is it? It's either the masculine nominative plural or it is the neuter dual. Most commonly in the nature of things, it's the masculine nominative plural, but don't fall into the trap because they are identical in form. You'll see at the top of page 147 a note on saha. That's he standing on its own. You will see it with the visarga only in one position, and that is at the end of a sentence. If the so sa avadat, I'm trying to do it without sandhi here, sa avadat, he said, becomes so vadat. So you get this ah followed by ah becoming a or, which we're very familiar with already. So sa at the end of a word becomes so before a following short ah. In all other cases, it's a bit irregular here. In all other cases, it's just sa. So before a following consonant is just sa. And before any vowel at all, apart from a short ah, it's always just sa. So it follows a rule here. It follows the rule of sandhi, as you know, ah plus any vowel that is plus a vowel, vowel except short a, right? I mean that's a short a. Then you just drop the visarga. He is coming. Sa agachati, like this. Sa agachati. And it'd be written in Devanagari like that. So the sa will just be written on its own, and then a word break, and then new word, agachati. Before a consonant, it just drops. In all circumstances, it simply drops the visarga. That Buddha, sa Buddha, that man, sa nara. But that's what I'm just talking about, the nominative singular masculine here. So that explains why you will almost always see it as the form sa. End of sentence only will you see a sa written with the visarga. Turning now to, say, end of a sentence, also end of a line of poetry, or you'll find it there as well. It's treated as an end of sentence for sandhi purposes. Now, looking at page 148, we have the declension of the pronoun, the feminine pronoun, sa, she, sa, tam, taya, tasyai, tasyah, tasyam, Look back now to the declension of Sena on page 145, and you will see that this actually fairly closely follows how Sena is declined. You'll also see that it follows fairly closely in the dual, and you'll also see that it follows pretty closely. I think is it exactly, pretty exactly. It follows Sena for the plural as well. So again, I emphasize, don't burden your brains unless you really want to with learning this by heart. But at this stage, it's easiest to, probably more fruitful as well, just to spot the recurring patterns. Now go to slightly soft focus, spot the recurring patterns. The bhyam, the asu, the abhya, and so on. Patterns and similarities. And they'll come much more easily into your mind. Note that I'm looking now at the top of page 149. Sa means he, but it can also mean it can also be a demonstrative pronoun. As I said earlier, I think that Buddha, sa Buddha, sanaro gacchati, that man goes. Incidentally, you will find that the sa can also be used somewhat pleonastically with a pronoun. For example, you'll see, so sa plus aham, what does that mean? He, I, which by santi that becomes soham, that I. In narration, you will sometimes find it almost as if the narrator is saying that person, who we refer to as I, so soham. It doesn't really add anything to the meaning as far as I've been able to see, but it's just a little linguistic flourish that you will occasionally see. Now looking at the second half now of page 149, paragraph 10, that boy goes sabalo gacchati. This is that the sa will always, you can be changed around in poetry a bit, but in standard prose, it precedes the noun it refers to. Like in English, that boy goes sabalo gacchati. And the boy goes to that village, balas tangramang gacchati. The boy, that village, in the accusative goes, balas tangramang gacchati. We'll look now at the bottom of the page, the word iva, which means like or as if. It's a very frequent occurrence. In Pali, remember, there's the Pali students among you, it will very often appear simply as the form va, very frequent indeed. In Sanskrit, it never loses the e, it's always an iva. Note well that point. You'll find it so often, the iva in Sanskrit and you can have an iva in Pali, but it's more common to have va, even though there's no, so to speak, sandhi need for that e to drop. So nripa iva balo vadati. The boy speaks like a king, speaks as if he were a king. Nripa iva vadati. And it's very often used in similes, poetic similes. Life is like a dream. You use the iva there, or he acts as if he were such and such, the iva. Now, looking at the vocabulary on page 150, first I'll go down them. Avidya, ignorance. I'm sure most of you know already that from the root vid, meaning both to see and to know, it has both meanings. Vidya, the ya is one of the ways in which you can make a noun out of a verb root. So vidya would mean knowledge. In Pali, by standard phonetic mutation, becomes vidya, and we put our alpha privative, that is our negating a, in front of us. So avidya, ignorance, and Pali the same, avidya, ignorance, non-seeing, non-knowing. Iva we've just had. Katha means a story, probably connected with the word katam, meaning how. You explain the how of something, you do the kata of it. It also may actually be cognate with our English word quote, and quoth he, said he. And the Latin inquit, the quit there, it's likely to be all from that same root. Kanya, girl. Kupita, we've had kupita with a short a. Now kupita, the feminine form, angry. Chaya, shadow. Putrika, daughter. No, putra is a son. Putrika, you don't say putra, by the way, just putrika. Sometimes it has a slightly diminutive effect, sometimes purely adjectival, dharmika, sometimes a diminutive effect, or putrika, daughter. Remember here, if you want to make the genitive plural of this in anam, putrikanam with the retroflex na, because the k is a letter that does not block the effect of the on the n. Putrikanam. Praja, child or subject of a king, exactly cognate with the word progeny, which we get from Greek and via Latin as well. Progeny, born forth, so that's the children that are produced forth from the parents, rather like the offspring, they spring from you. Praja, that's the word. Bala, we've had Bala, a boy, Bala, a girl. Bharya is a wife. This word actually is from the root bri, meaning to bear. Cognate with our English word to bear as in bear and burden, from that same root bri. To bear or to carry. It also means to support, as in the sense of supporting a family, supporting your wife and children. And the future passive participle, it takes the vridhi of the ra, so it takes that which is to be supported. In the masculine form would be bharya, and in the feminine form, bharya, she who must be supported, referring to the husband's duty to support the wife, she who must be supported. Next one, mala, meaning a garland. Vidya, we've had the negated form of vidya, the first word in this vocabulary list. Vidya, knowledge. Sita, the wife of Rama, Rama, Sita, famous couple from the Ramayana. And Sena, army. So that concludes the grammar section for this lesson, and my next video will be the exercises, exercises 1, 2, and 3, and then in a separate video I'll go through with you the story of the now expanded version of the story of the monkey and the crocodile, beginning at page 153. So I'll wind up now for this video.